Okay, everyone, we are going to get started. As you may have heard from the various social media and event management sites, we have brought to us actually a long time coming. We were planning on having Deputy Mayor Sharon Owens for Earth Week because it fit really well with our theme and the work we were doing to start to talk about environmental and social justice issues. But as you know, we just didn't have that happen with so much uncertainty in the spring semester. So I want to thank Deputy Mayor Sharon Owens and her staff, Haley and Mary, for being on their call and for setting this up for us. So Deputy Mayor Owens is coming to us from the city of Syracuse and has done a lot of work with lead paint abatement. And so without further ado, I have a lot more. Sharon has done a lot of work in the community at the Dunbar Center and Peace, and I know as a mother, and I think this lead paint really does hit home. I'm fortunate that I don't live in a home. I did before children, but I want to again thank her for the work that she's about to do, has been doing, and will do for us at this talk today. So thank you again. Use the chat feature. We are recording this. During the chat, I'll monitor it, and then obviously at the end, we'll open it up for questions. So thank you again for being here, everyone, and I'll turn it over to Deputy Mayor Owens, and we'll get started.
So thank you, Laura, so much for having me on. As you mentioned, I've been working in the Syracuse community for over 30 years after graduating from Syracuse University, and have really started my career right on the ground in the various neighborhoods in our community, and have really gotten to work with families through preschool and early education, and a lot of my career was around neighborhood revitalization and housing. While working at Peace, we were working so hard to help individuals really make choices for themselves and to identify goals for themselves as they look to change the direction of their lives. And one thing that became apparently clear is that as they began to transform as individuals, the neighborhoods they were living in and the housing they were living in did not keep pace with their expectations for their lives and the lives of their children. So my career transitioned and never stopped working with individuals, but really started looking at neighborhood revitalization and housing issues in particular. And I serve now under Mayor Ben Walsh. I was also serving under Mayor Stephanie Miner for the first 3 years of her first term, and then had the opportunity to go run the Southwest Community Center. And that really felt like going home to me, going back to the neighborhood that my career started in. And so I did that. And then when Mayor Walsh came on board, I said yes, because I saw the opportunity again to create policy that's going to affect what we're going to be talking about today, and social environmental justice. And environmental justice and social justice is so intertwined. It just so is. And as we talk about this, you'll see how one really plays on the other, and why, and how one is affected by the other. So I am going to, we did trial run. Let me see if it worked again. Yes, share. Am I sharing? Awesome. So I'm going to be talking to you very briefly, not a long presentation, about the fight against lead poisoning. And I use the word fight because this is absolutely what it is. It is a war against what is a insidious environmental foe for so many of our families. And so across the agenda, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to talk briefly about the history of lead paint. I'm going to talk about the health impacts of lead. I'm going to go over some data, and then I'm going to talk about our efforts to protect the community. And my coworker and colleague, Mary Margaret O'Hara, is also on the call. And at that point, I'm going to ask her to chime in, as she is at the helm of our lead program. Okay. So history of lead. Lead-based paint was used extensively before 1960, because it was just more durable. than other paints available at the time. But then due to the harm that it caused, lead paint caused, in 1978, lead-based paint was banned from residential use. Surprisingly, it's still commonly used in commercial and industrial applications. Many of the industrial settings, metal doors or the equipment or handrails, metal surfaces will still have, some will still have lead paint because it was not banned, only banned for residential use. And so the health impacts of lead are devastating. New York State requires doctors to test all children for lead poisoning at ages of 1 and 2, and only a blood test can be used to determine how much lead is in a child's body. And the CDC monitors and requires follow up with these children based on the amount of lead that's found in their blood. Now, this is extremely personal to me. I have a now 20-year-old young man in my home who is in the autistic spectrum. And I remember buying my first home. It was a beautiful, Syracuse, it just has beautiful old homes, um, which is the greatness of our community, but it is also the foundational problem with this lead issue. And so I bought, my first home was a beautiful 1945 bungalow, just in love with it. When my son was 2 years old, he went to his routine doctor's appointment and he came back with an elevated lead level. And at that time, and he's 20 now, I didn't know what that meant. I didn't understand, you know, what does that mean, and what's going on with it. And the doctor just began to tell me that they'll begin to um, continue to monitor his development. And my hu- and my and you as a parent always have your gut about something, so there's nothing definitively saying that his autism or being in the spectrum had anything to do with the lead in my home. When he was born in that house, he was born and raised in that house. My daughter, who is 10 years older than him, she grew up in an apartment that had fresh new paint in it. This house had old windows in it, old sills in it, um, and that was the charm about it that I loved. And so his developmental milestones, he hit all of the physical developmental milestones, but when he was about 2.5, we began to see that some of his cognitive and more than anything, his oratory ability was really delayed. And so whether or not it had to do with lead in my home, whether or not, but one thing we do know is that lead affects the brainstem of affects the brainstem. And all of you brilliant people on this call who are getting going to school and getting your higher education degrees, your bachelor's and your master's degrees, your brain never developed as fast as it did from the time you were born until you were 6 years old. It develops the fastest it's ever going to develop during that time of your life. And that is the time when most kids are exposed to lead in old homes, because you know, the old commercial of the kids actually peeling the paint off of the walls. Well, that is not necessarily the case. The case is more so the friction that looses lead based paint on windowsills, and kids see that and they literally do eat it, but more often it is the fine particles that kids are ingesting that is affecting their development. So again, lead interferes with the development of the nervous system and the internal organs. And the risk for lead poisoning is greatest in children under 6, as I've said. And my experience as a mom with my younger child, my daughter did not have lead exposure. We were not in an older home. By the time my son was born, we had bought this first beautiful bungalow. Um, and young children don't understand the risk of deteriorating lead paint, and so we have to take action to protect them. And anyone can be affected by lead, and pregnant women are especially high risk, as lead can be passed on to their unborn babies during pregnancy. As I said in the beginning, it is insidious. Excuse me. So lead poisoning in Onondaga County, almost 12% of children tested in Onondaga County. Now, remember, um, in New York State, doctors are required to test all children at the ages of 1 and 2 years old, and then follow-up testing depending on the results. So almost 12% of children tested in Onondaga County had elevated blood lead levels. And what is more specific to the conversation we're going to have around environmental justice is that while only 20% of kids in Onondaga County reside in the city of Syracuse, 90% of the children tested who came back with elevated lead levels reside in the city. 90% of the kids who tested. Only 20% of the kids in Onondaga County reside in the city of Syracuse. So when you think of disparities, that is a huge one, and we're going to delve a little bit more into those. So this is a map that lays out elevated blood levels among tested children. This is 2018 map by census tract, and you'll see that the easiest way to look is that the deeper the color, the higher the lead levels are in the children that were tested in those areas. And as you look at the area here, if you're not familiar with the city of Syracuse, this is the south and southwest sides of the city of Syracuse, the near west side of the city of Syracuse, and the north side of the city of Syracuse. Another map will show our NSRA area. As a HUD recipient, we designate certain areas of the city based on some criteria, poverty being one, poverty being one, and housing stock, the deterioration of housing stock being another. The NSRA's neighborhood revitalization strategy areas, the idea behind that is that we're looking at areas that meet those criteria where we would prioritize and target HUD funds for neighborhood revitalization programming and housing renovation. And I'll show you another map that will it completely mirrors our NSRAs. There are 2 neighborhood revitalization strategy areas in the city of Syracuse. One almost mirrors this area here. The other almost exactly mirrors this area here. So the correlation around poor housing stock, concentrated poverty, and these high lead levels. The other thing about these that I'm sure we'll get into the discussion is that the conversation around COVID and COVID infections in our community, and particularly in the Syracuse community, some of the highest zip codes were again in these areas. So protecting children from lead is important for their lifelong good health, and even low levels, we want no lead in the bloodstream of children. That is the ultimate goal, no lead, no signs of lead in a child's lead level, to ensure that it's not affecting their physical and cognitive development. And fortunately, lead poisoning is entirely preventable. It's like, well, if it's that preventable, how did we stop it? How did we keep it from just affecting so many of our children? It all starts. I am an absolute proponent of where you lay your head, where you lay your head in your pillow every night, every day. Is it clean? Is it safe? Is it affordable? Is it free of toxins? Lead is one. Is it free of vermin and other kind of ailments that can affect your ability to live in a healthy manner? Is where you lay your head in the middle of a food desert? Is where you lay your head in a high crime area, particularly gun violence and the trauma that comes from that? So many different elements that affect who you are based on where you live, which is absolutely unacceptable. What zip code you grow up in should not determine the trajectory for your life, your health, your wellness, your ability to function in our community. So I'm really proud of our community because we really have coalesced around efforts to work collaboratively to advance healthy housing in Syracuse. And so as I just talked about, you know, where you live and where you lay your head down, is it peaceful? Is it safe? Is it affordable? Is it less stressful? Particularly when we talk about the time of COVID, when we are sheltering in, what if your area, what if the place that you shelter in, that you call home, is not safe, is not healthy, is not affordable, does not have food in it? And as we go into the winter months, being able to heat it. So again, housing is the crux of why we have a lead problem in the city of Syracuse. And um, that housing stock, as I said to you, when I was looking to buy my first home, um, I wasn't interested in getting a new construction home, which would have been everything in it brand spanking new and no traces of any toxin, supposedly. I love the historic nature of Syracuse and its historic housing stock. But what comes with that historic housing stock, for those of us who have bought a house, is just the things that go with old houses. I loved all the woodwork. I loved all of that. But some of that woodwork, in retrospect, particularly around the windowsills, had years of layered lead paint. Now, Sharon, you said 1978 lead was banned. Lead-based paint was banned. But if you ever have been in an older house, particularly about windowsills, you will find at least 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 20 layers of paint on that windowsill. It is not the higher surface, the surface of the lead that you see. It is all the layers underneath, that when the friction of a window going up and down, or windows are moved quite a bit, and that paint begins to break up, it begins to expose that lead-based paint that originally was there right up until 1978. And so this map is broken into all of our census tracts, and it tells us just the number of properties in that census tract built before 1978. And because this is so small, the blue are up to 46 houses. The lighter blue is around, 50 to about 150. The lighter blue. When you get to the white areas, again, look at the consistencies of the other maps I showed you around poverty and around our NSRA and around the lead levels. The white areas are between 150 and 220 number of houses in those census tracts that were built before 1978. You get to this kind of pinkish color, and now we're looking at between over 220 to almost 300 houses in that census tract built before 1978. And then the red are the oldest housing stock in the city of Syracuse. Again, what are the consistencies? Consistent with the lead testing levels that we showed before. Relatively speaking, there's not a whole bunch of a lot of new construction in Syracuse, but people who buy homes in Syracuse buy them because they actually love the old housing stock. But again, what comes with that whole old housing stock in many cases may be lead-based paint that you or your family member or your visitors to your home are exposed to. And so again, the coalitions of individuals, agencies, philanthropy, government, not-for-profits that have health partners that have come together to really attack. And when I say the fight, it is a fight to attack this enemy of our families and particularly our children. City of Syracuse is partnered lockstep with Onondaga County, who is the entity overseeing testing of children and monitoring the testing. So the partnership really is Onondaga County monitoring the testing that's coming from the doctor's offices, notifying the parents so they're aware of these lead issues, working with the doctors to ensure the follow-up is happening as required by the CDC. And then the city of Syracuse is really in the business of, yes, again, educating, but also attempting to remediate the lead as much as possible to get rid of it, or to find ways to protect people and young children in particular from the lead. We also had not-for-profit partners, home headquarters, who run programs that help with renovation programs for property owners to be able to remediate lead issues. And so I'm going to say this part, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mary Margaret to talk about our lead program. But one of the newest things that happened that was approved, oh my goodness, life is before COVID and after COVID, or still during COVID. This was approved, I believe it was last fall, is the new general ordinance, chapter 54, which is the lead abatement and control ordinance that was developed. We developed this ordinance by Mayor Walsh is a proponent of do not reinvent the wheel, but make sure the wheel fits for Syracuse. And so we went down the road to our partners in Rochester that have been running a lead program for quite a few years now, and we implemented this new ordinance. It is a new law in the city of Syracuse, and I won't read it verbatim, but it really is looking to require interior and exterior inspections to identify lead-based problems in pre-1978 residential structures, and for interior and exterior, and then exterior for non-residential structures. We really took it a step further for non-residential because if there is lead-based paint on the exterior and the owner is scraping, it is still affecting anyone in the neighborhood, the soil around the property. So we are addressing a residential for interior and exterior pre-built 1978 pre-built structures, and exterior for pre-1978 non-residential structures. And that is the major thing that this ordinance is going to do. And so how we're going to be able to do this, it seeks to reduce the rate of lead poisoning by proactively inspecting buildings. So our chapter 27 of our ordinance, of our revised general ordinance of the city, and it's called our Property Conservation Code. It is the code by which it is the code department's Bible, this chapter 27. And so this law will now make part of make visual assessments of deteriorating paint and soil violations a requirement of our inspections. So when the inspectors go into the properties now for any buildings with 5 or fewer units, they will do visual assessments of deteriorating paint. So they're going to go straight to the areas that I've talked about: window sills, baseboards, door frames, where you usually find peeling or chipped paint, for a visual assessment of whether or not there are visual peeling paint. And we're operating with the assumption that there is lead paint present. And we'll do dust swipes to evaluate for sure if that's the case. Even when there are not visual indications of chipping paint, we're operating under the assumption that if it was built before 1978, it has lead in the home. The distinction I want to point out with the soil violations here is because it is important for those external inspections to happen as well, because you see people, soon as we have weather that's hot enough, people are outside, and if they don't have siding, they are scraping that paint. And if that paint is lead-based paint, because usually they're scraping pretty much down to the foundation of the house, depending on how much painting needs to happen. And so they are scraping right down to the foundation. Where is all of that paint going? Right into the soil that surrounds the house. Where do children play? Right in the yards that surround the house, in the grass, in the soil. And so we are looking both, as I mentioned before, internally and externally. So as the law was approved and signed and slated to go into effect October 1st, and then COVID hit. So how is COVID going to affect our ability to really implement the law? One is that we have not, except for emergency situations, backing up sewers, etc., we have not been doing interior inspections. We are beginning to modify that now, so our rollout is going to be affected by the fact that, you know, we have our own employees that we're sending into homes, and we don't know whether people are quarantined or asymptomatic or what the case is with COVID. So we're working now to talk about various adjustments we can make. We're talking about, you know, we're living in the virtual world, that we could actually ask individuals within the house to just show us virtually windowsills as the law is enacted of various houses with that. Understanding again, if it was built before 1978, there is the presumption now that there's lead in the house. We're in an eviction moratorium at various stages and rules. It is so complex and what applies and what doesn't. But for the most part, an individual it is unlawful for an individual to be evicted during this COVID epidemic. And until the governor lifts that, and he has expanded it now, people cannot be evicted. So Sharon, what does that have to do with lead? Some property owners find very innovative and creative ways to, in sense, evict people that they don't want to continue in their property, turning off utilities, you know, turning off water, turning off heat. And another way that we could inadvertently cause an eviction is to cite in our inspection process for lead. So we're again figuring out ways, because the other thing is that we don't want children exposed to lead, but we also don't want people to be housing vulnerable, particularly as winter is approaching. And then the city's financial status. We just went through a painstaking process because of a huge dip in revenues. Sales tax is a major part of our city revenue. I don't know if many people know this, but approximately close to 49-ish% of our property owners pay 100% of the tax base. And why is that, Sharon? Because so much of what makes our city great is all of our hospitals and educational institutions that are tax exempt. So there is 100% tax-based need to provide the critical services to our city, but about 49% of property owners pay into that tax base. And so we rely heavily on sales tax and other revenues to balance that. And we just had to find $18 million to cut. And so part of that cut had to do with not filling vacant positions. We had put into our budget that was passed in June of this year, new code inspectors, testing, dollars for testing, dollars for evaluation, and all of that. Now we're partnering with our philanthropic partners to identify other ways that we can bring non-tax revenue to the city, so we can replace that important resource that we now are scrambling to figure out how we're going to finance it. At this point, I think I'm going to stop sharing and ask Mary Margaret if you can talk to the audience about our lead program and the great work that you're doing. You're muted. There, try again. There you go. You're muted again.
Okay, can you hear me now? Great. Yeah, thank you, Sharon. The information about the dangers of lead and it being completely preventable. I remember when I first started working in lead about 5 years ago, I had always known it was something of a hazard, a problem, but I never realized how serious and how irreversible the damage is. And as Sharon mentioned, the children who are most vulnerable in our community, well, all children are vulnerable, but particularly in the city of Syracuse, as 95% of our housing stock was built before 1978. And as children learn to their environment around them, they're crawling on floors, they put toys in their mouth, they put their hands in their mouth, they play outside, maybe they don't wash their hands before they eat, and they go in their mouth. And so all of this dust and dirt can really affect a child. So what the city of Syracuse has been trying to do for the past several years is to bring back a program that provides federal funding to households that meet a certain income threshold. And we coordinate contractors who, a lead inspection and a risk assessment, and contractors who will actually evaluate with, it's something called an XRF machine, which is essentially an X-ray machine in the form of it kind of looks like like a laser beam, and you have to be highly certified to be able to use it because it's controlled federal material. But we have these certified inspectors go into the qualified applicant's home. While I'm speaking, I'm also going to share my my screen. I'd like you to see the lead application, and then I can give you some data around who we help. So this federal program is run by the Office of Lead Hazard Control in Healthy Homes. It's a division of HUD, and it focuses on, I have to call this up again. There are three what we call incurables. So the three elements that need to be present in order to be qualified for a grant are: the house needs to be built before 1978. A child under the age of 6 needs to either live there or spend a significant amount of time. And I'm going to show you the application. And the third is that they have to meet the income threshold. So in our lead application, and if anybody is interested or knows of someone they'd like to have apply, please reach out. We are still accepting grant applications. But here you can see the area median income and the guidelines. So, we do respect these guidelines, and they have to be no more than 80% of the area income. So for a family of 4, all of the household income that we collect cannot be over $63,600. But the importance of this grant is that when we go in with the machine to x-ray all of the painted surfaces, the x-ray report will produce a range, and it will give us what we should do. So we're not kind of going in there blind and saying, oh, that door looks old, let's replace it. We would actually be seeing for safety measures, all right, can this be repainted? Can this be fixed? Does it need to be replaced? And that's based on science and the x-ray report that we get back. And then once that happens, I'm just kind of taking you through the application right now that the owner occupant or the tenant will fill out if it's a rental property. And then we're able to, the process is we have a county and citywide list of qualified construction firms who have EPA certifications in lead, EPA lead removal, and firm certifications and supervisor certifications, and they've been vetted and approved by the county. We're able to send these out and we get bids back. These construction firms bid on them, and just so you know how the city and county procurement goes, we award to the lowest responsible bidder. So those are vague terms in terms of responsible, but usually it just means in our case that the contractor doesn't have a workload that wouldn't allow them to get to this property soon. So once the work starts and you know, whatever the X-ray machine said to do, whether it was replace all the windows, to paint the porch or replace the doors, we do that. And then we have a separate firm come in, not related to the contractor, not related to the owner, not related to the program, but a firm that does clearance, and with a dust wipe, we'll be able to show, once we have those sent away to a separate lab, that yes, this home is lead safe. So it's a lengthy process to get to a healthy home, but it's all very worth it. And we are trying, you know, in our community to make as many homes as we can lead safe. As Sharon said, you know, for the children that that reside here. A couple of the other kind of interesting stats that I can share with you. I just keep losing my. So is that we also perform, while we're doing lead, sometimes there's other hazards at the home. So there may be a big sewer break. There could be some roof damage. And although that's not lead related, we do have some monies related to the grant that allow us to come in and fix the problem. But I wanted to show you, can you see the data? I don't know that you can, what you're seeing, but can you see the total population in target area portion of my screen?
Yes, we could see it.
Okay, so this was the data that we submitted to HUD, and it does really just kind of elevate what everything that Sharon was saying, that the children who are tested in our community and that come back with high levels of lead, we have 11.5% that come back with over 5 microunits per gram. And that is, there is no safe level of lead. If a house is built before 1978, the danger of there being lead present is real, and it's really important that we address the health of our housing stock. So I'm going to stop there with the lead application and our lead program, but let me know if you'd like the application or have any questions.
Mary Margaret, because you work alongside the county with the contractors, there was one great question about how the lead paint is disposed of using the safe practices, how that happens.
Yeah, there's the firms that I personally I can get you that information, like the breakdown of exactly how that happens. But what happens at a work site is something called containment. So while the contractor and the workers are performing, they have special, like if they were to work in one area of a home and there was a door, this is an example of containment, there would be a sheath over the door with a way to cut so that workers can get in and out. And then there's the drop cloths on the floor there. And so everything is contained. It's kind of, and also it's very important to keep it wet so the particles aren't flying around, because as Sharon mentioned, it's not the paint chips, it's the parts you can't see, the dust that gets distributed. So, so where they take it, I don't know. I'm sure that may vary from firm to firm, but by the nature of receiving the certification that they have from the EPA, they're held to ethical disposing of the particles.
So I thank you so much for the information. I do see a couple other questions, and thank you for sharing where to find that application. One question that I really appreciate from one of our graduate students, Justin, is that I'll read the questions just so I could do it justice. And I did already see a student write back to Justin, but I own an old home as well, and I am aware of lead pipes connecting the cast iron main to my home faucets. I know throughout the city we have removed public lead water pipes, but a lot of homes continue to use the lead connecting pipes. Is there any evidence that these pipes contribute to lead levels in Syracuse?
So Syracuse doesn't, in Onondaga County, our health department would be tracking that, but they have consistently said that the water, if you're worried, you can test it. There is free testing kits you can pick up at the county. You can pick them up at Home Depot or Lowe's, but it generally is not a grave problem in Syracuse. And the very best way to eliminate lead and other contaminants in your water is to let your water run in the morning on cold for at least a minute, and never boil or heat anything or drink out of the hot water tap. Always use the cold water tap and heat it, but don't use hot water to cook with.
Also, I'll add that the county and city, what we're operationally responsible for is extremely confusing. It's confusing for me, so I know it's confusing for all the folks that live in Onondaga County and Syracuse. But the infrastructure, water infrastructure, the sewer lines, the city of Syracuse does repair and maintain water lines, and particularly those conduits that lead to your house. Once the connection gets to your house, it's no longer the city's responsibility, which can be extremely expensive. I can't think of any home improvement job that's more expensive than plumbing, and so that's why we're also clear to refer people to our housing partners like a home headquarters, who I don't think people know this, they do more home improvement loans, and this is not advertisement for them, they just are amazing at the work they do. In all of Onondaga County, they just have great home ownership programs.
I see another question, and I bought my first city home from home headquarters with my partner, so definitely can attest to it. If you're sticking around Syracuse for 5 years or so, it's always a good investment. So, and I think this question is a really, really great one. So again, I'll read it from Isabel. Lack of accessibility to healthcare and primary care providers due to poverty is arguably one of the biggest problems in the U.S. If a child's family does not have insurance because of economic difficulties, said child could grow up past age 2 without being tested for lead. Is there an estimate of how many lead cases go untracked because of lack of accessibility to health care?
I'm not aware of how that's tracked, but I will, whether that information is tracked. But what I will say is that because of the mandate from New York State, Onondaga County is required to provide safety nets for uninsured individuals. Children 1 to 2, and this is probably the best thing that all of us can do for each other, is children 1 to 2, Onondaga County is absolutely required to ensure that those young people are tested. If there are individuals, they don't have insurance, uh, they can get tested through Onondaga County by going to one of downtown to the second floor, getting referral into the program for testing. Individuals can get tested through the clinic or one of the other providers, whether it be one of our federally funded health providers like the Syracuse Community Health Center. To ensure that, because one thing that Onondaga County does well is its pre and peri and postnatal care and pediatric care. And so it is the 1 to 2, the testing for the 1 to 2 year olds, ensuring that kids are connected from birth into a doctor. The follow-up is where I get concerned because of so many different variables that affect the lives of families. Whether they have Medicaid or not, it is just the choosing between going to work or going to take your kid to the doctor. I mean, these are ongoing health disparity issues that we're talking about in our community. And COVID has put a huge magnifying glass on all of it. Just the inequities in our healthcare system for individuals and how, whether it be lead, whether it be care for pregnant moms, whether it be pediatric care, hypertension, high blood pressure, the very things that COVID seeks out to take advantage of are the things that we find in all of those red areas that we were talking about. Lead are equally the same areas where you find huge levels of hypertension, huge levels of asthma, huge levels of diabetes. I see the question about the school water fountains. I don't know. I definitely will ask that question, what that process is. I know that the districts are going through huge renovations now and replacing much of the mechanicals in many of the schools, but I will research that question with the district. Laura, I can get that answer back to you.
That'd be great. Thank you. I had a personal question for me. It looks like the application, although it might be simple, could actually be pretty labor intensive, or perhaps, you know, if someone's working 2 or 3 jobs, struggling with everything. Do you have assistance on filling out the forms? And how many people have done the form out of how many people are out there for needing to have, you know, do you have numbers on this?
Before Mary Margaret answers that question, I'm going to come to her rescue first, because that's the one thing she gets hammered about. That application is ridiculous. And she and I will be the first people to tell you it is ridiculous, but it is a HUD required application. And so Mary Margaret, please talk about how we help people get through it.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon. It's a bear. I mean, everything from all of the income documentation that they require, 2 months worth of anyone 18 and over in the household. There could be, you know, someone that's 19 and maybe they're not working. And so we make them sign a declaration of no income and have it notarized. You know, the hurdles are just, you know, and then if there is a child at the property, we do require a blood lead level test. It can't be more than 3 months old. So let's say the child is, you know, and a lot of times what happens, let's say the child's not even a year yet, because usually we don't test until at their 1-year-old appointment. You know, HUD will allow that to pass through, but then they'll have to submit a test later on. I will say, There is, in our database currently, we have 98 approved applications. And our cycle is until October 2022. And we're supposed to be using up 230 slots of those grants. So we have remaining 100 and I guess 32 spots open. And as for how many are approved, the approval rate is actually quite high. We do get, number one, the three incurables, so 1978, the income level, and the child under the age of 6. It's not hard at all in Syracuse to prove that the house is 95% of our housing stock is eligible. After that, the most people that apply are eligible. We're not in the wealthiest community in the U.S. And so we do have most of the applicants that apply are eligible. As far as 6 years old, under 6, is, there's a flexibility with that too, in that if I show you the application again, HUD defines a significant amount of time. That means that even if you're not, let's say you're a grandmother and you live alone, but you'd like, you have your grandkids over a bit and you want to make sure your house is safe for them, but you don't have a child under the age of 6 that lives with you. There's a part of the application, and I can share my screen again, that allows for anyone that has a child, this part, the resident visiting child form, a visiting child, so it's a child under the age of 6, that spends at least 2 different days within any week, Sunday through Saturday, 3 hours, combined weekly visits, at least 6 hours. That's a pretty complicated and complex, formula. And you can believe that, nobody has the capacity to come over to somebody's house and evaluate if the person is, do they really have their grandkids there? So that's really, that's a wash. If there's a part of the application where they sign a little part where they say everything that they bring is true, and so we go with that. But yeah, the application's really hard. It's really, really hard, and so it's something that it can take several months to make sure that everyone's got their documentation in. Lots of phone calls, lots of letters, lots of emails, and we are trying. We want to approve people. We want to make it easy for people. We want to help people, get to the finish line on the application. We want our houses healthy in Syracuse. So it's not easy, because it's just not an easy ask. But it's what it is.
Mary Margaret, there's one question. Do you need to meet all 3 incurables to qualify?
Yes, those, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there's a question about problems with non-residential buildings where children often can be found in schools. So the schools have an another level of building regulatory requirements that they have to meet. Every district has its facility management team of folks who have to meet those requirements to be able to operate. And I would not even try to answer that question, but ask you to really direct that to your local school district, which will have individuals who are very astute with building requirements for schools. It's all governed by the Department of Education and extremely stringent. I just want to take a moment, because the conversation is really, crouched in environmental justice, and really just circle back around on that topic about how historically in this country, where you live determines how you live, how healthy you are, what access you have, whether it's healthcare, whether it's your ability to be fair, equitable economic opportunities. Every aspect. That's why when I started, I say, if you're talking about, and we're in a time and place in this country where, depending on who you talk to, you know, we're the United States of America, and we've grown to, and this couch is couched in, depending on who you're talking to a level of greatness, especially economic greatness. But what we're dealing right now is a reckoning about how we became who we are. And we became an economic powerhouse in this world off the backs of enslaved people. And as we're even looking at I-81, and the entire economy of this country was developed out of free labor, slave labor. And so there's a reckoning now about that racial inequity, that social injustice around who we are as a country. And when you think of that social and that social unrest around police reform, the same picketing in the streets can go on about housing. And the need for housing reform in our community, because I will say it over and over and over again. We go to our jobs every day, but we're learning more and more now that where we call home impacts how we live. And if we're not living healthy, safe, affordable, our domestic violence calls are up because our abusees are being sheltered in with their abusers. And it's a lot of different complexities and conversations around just how we live in our homes. Is it comfortable? Is it healthy? Is it safe? And so I think that that whole topic is magnified like everything else around COVID, because we were sheltering in place in our safe space. What if that space is not safe?
Thank you. Those are great points. I know that Dr. Turan, who actually was one of the catalysts behind moving our environmental justice work forward, who teaches our very popular environmental justice course, also wanted to say a few words. So Dr. Turan.
Thank you all, Ms. Owens, brilliant presentation. And I'm really glad that your summation concluded with the racial injustice embedded in this. You know, that 80-20% county-city divide is horrific. And anybody that doesn't see the racial implications and know that that's going to land disproportionately on young Black people, they need their head examined. So if you couple that with the air quality issues that folks on the South Side are exposed to, food insecurity, you know, we could do a census of some downtown businesses, and I'll show you some spots where folks, brown and Black folks, have never been able to get meaningful employment. When you couple all those things together, it's almost like if you're Black and you can make it through, you deserve a congressional medal. So with that being said, we've been working on some things with the Central New York wide on how can we get an environmental justice agenda for the region and for the city of Syracuse. So I know we don't have time to talk about it today, but I'm just really glad that you interconnected those issues, and at the core is the racial inequality, whether you're talking about environmental exposures, exposure to excessive policing, lack of employment, et cetera. It's so thorough and really important that we see the nexus of all these issues.
Absolutely. If the social unrest around police reform has not shaken the tree of our consciousness and awakened our consciousness to not just, and that is, I'm not simplifying that at all, but it should just begin to have a catalyst of a lot of different injustices that are going on. And she's a broken record. I can't emphasize enough how important where you live, where you lay your head down, that it has to be safe, clean, affordable, comfortable. Absolutely. Mary Margaret, there was one question about pregnant women. Did you see that, about qualifying for the program?
Yes, when a woman is pregnant, that counts as a child under 1, and under 6, but under 1, of course. Yeah.
Can I ask a further question about pregnant women? If I become pregnant and, it typically could be a 9-month journey, when would, and I do all the paperwork, would I realistically have my lead paint taken care of? Or what is the average timeline if I do all of my paperwork and get it all in?
That's a really, really important question. And unfortunately, I don't have a definite answer for you because so if you have all the paperwork in and you're approved, so because it can take a long time to get the paperwork in, that can be months. But let's say someone, we count it from now the paperwork is all in, you're approved. I can give you a timeline. You receive an approval letter. In the approval letter, you have the name of the inspector who will be contacting you to set up a date to do what I was talking about with the X-ray machine. And so that can be a window of time depending on the inspector's availability and the person's availability. But usually, at least 2 weeks or so. And then we have the specifications on what needs to be done at the home that come back from the report of the X-ray machine. And that can be about 2 weeks. And then like the work spec is written up and we send that out to a list of contractors who bid. And that process is inherently 2 weeks because that is a procurement process. So once we have that and a company who's been awarded accepts the bid, there's another probably at least 30 days until they set up the job. And so once they set up the job, they're usually finished within 2 weeks. But that's even what I just described to you, a quick timeline. Because if, like we have right now, we have 16 certified firms, but we share these firms with the county who has the same grant. And we have 96 in the pipeline. They have about 70. That's a lot of people waiting out there for these 16 contractors to get started on their units. But yeah, I mean, it may or may not happen while a woman is pregnant. It may happen. So I can understand the upheaval in someone's life, especially if you're trying to get a nursery ready or you want to make sure you're safe from any kind of those dust particles or any residuals. I mean, we do have a health care, a Department of Health worker come in and sit down with the approved family and learn about also how to clean and maintain their older property. Because when you do have chipping or peeling paint, we do that even while they're waiting to get set up, while they're waiting, and we explain to them, don't ever, use a broom to sweep up any of the paint chips, or don't ever use just a cloth and like try to wipe it into a bag. Everything needs to be wet. Everything has to be wet. If you're going to clean anything, it has to be done, with a wet cloth, paper towel, and then you immediately dispose of it with a HEPA vac or with the wet Swiffer that then you immediately throw away. So yeah, those are just, unfortunately, we don't have a great, time.
I just want to clarify on one question from Mary on the line. Anyone can be blood tested for lead. The grants from HUD are related to property. So the crux of the source of the lead contamination is from the property or the location, the home, the apartment, wherever the person is living. So the HUD, which is the Department of Housing and Urban Development, uses that funds to address the source of the lead contamination, which is the house. I don't know if that answered your question, Mary. I also want to, I also want to just take a minute to talk about, and I made this comment, please, please, please. Back when I was growing up, when I bought my first house, I just grabbed my, my cousin's friend that does painting, and they would come in and they would scrape the house and they would do the painting, and I would give them whatever we agreed on to be paid. Please get people for this work who are EPA certified. And if you even have someone you know that does handyman work or construction work who wants to be EPA certified, we can provide them that information too on how to get trained and get that certification. For the protection, not only is it dangerous for our children, our families to be in a home, the lead that is being disturbed just by just normal opening our windows because it's Syracuse and we want fresh air in the summer and in the fall, like these great nights like this, open your windows up. Consider how worse it is when you have someone who doesn't know how to do it appropriately or safely, just coming in and scraping and loosening this old paint. Please, EPA certified, thank you, Mary Margaret, EPA certified contractors, please.
So I just posted a question, and I do want to encourage, just a few more minutes left of our panelists' time. And thank you again for the both of you being on this call, this Zoom. But what is like a call to action that you might say to our average citizen of Onondaga County in the city of Syracuse, where so many of our college students live? What is a call to action that we can do for them besides using the EPA approved contractors, of course?
We have, first of all, educating yourselves, educating your neighbors, property owners in the neighborhood. Just we have loads of information that can be available. We've sent you to several websites. Our Office of Code Enforcement is always available if there are concerns about living conditions, no matter what they are. In addition to our low-income neighborhoods that we've outlined, where there are huge housing issues and housing concerns. Another population that live in property that they, in some situations, probably should not be in if a code inspector went in there, is some of the housing that some of your students rent. And so they are always welcome to call our Office of Code Enforcement to get in touch with us. Again, through the city website, you can get access to that to protect yourself, and if there is an issue, to bring it to the attention. I also want to point out that one of the extremely frustrating parts of all this has been, and we're working hard about it, we do all this great work, really creating a public portal by which Laura, you test positive, you have an elevated lead level, we begin to work and hold the property owner accountable, you move. So the documentation about the fact that we know there's lead is because of the individual. So you move to another lead safe building. Well, the family coming behind you doesn't know why you moved. And so we are really working to figure out a methodology, and we're going through, everything has some legal connotation to it. You should hear my conversations with legal people. Just do it. No, we can't just do it. You have to make sure that it's legal and you're not violating people's rights and all of that. But the idea would be that if I'm looking to move into an apartment, I can see whether or not it was cited for lead and was it addressed before I move in. What is the sense of doing all this great work because a young child tests positive? We actually, many times that's coupled with bad plumbing, backing up sewers, and it's probably best for the family to move, but that property owner didn't do anything to address it. And then the next desperate family moves into that address. That is hugely, we're partnering, many of those families get rental subsidies from the county. So we've partnered with an inspection process where they pay for a couple of our code inspectors to actually verify that the house is safe before Onondaga County, your tax dollars, pays a property owner who is not taking care of their property. Thanks, Mary Margaret.
All right, I don't see any other questions, but thank you so much for all of this information. It's just been really fascinating to learn, and it's right in our backyards, and I think that that is so important where the colleges sit, where 81 has divided our community, and it does lend nicely to the talk that we had with Lanessa Owens chaplain. So, we're going to continue these talks, of course, but keep doing your research. Thank you again. There's over 60 of you on this call. I really appreciate it. Next month in October, we are going to talk about food. I heard food deserts mentioned a lot, and we'll have some folks from SU's food studies program, as well as a practitioner from the Syracuse City School District.
If I can just real quickly, COVID again, magnifying glass. The numbers of individuals who we saw come to our pop-up pantries during the pandemic, the height of it, who you could tell have never been to a pantry before. They didn't know the routine, they didn't know where to go. And if you remember those lines of cars at the state fair to get one box of food, people in line for an hour. Food insecurity is the next pandemic-like situation for us.
Absolutely, and that's really what I was finding when just talking with people. That some of the folks who we had identified actually did a COVID talk in, I want to say, June through SU, and a lot of their data has continually changed and morphed and changed. So I think that that is going to be another thing, like Deputy Mayor Owens had said, that is really important that we discuss. And so I really appreciate all of the different students coming in, and I think that, as Dr. Turan has really enlightened and kind of awoken me to this work, is there's so much that you all can do to continue to raise awareness of the social inequalities and move forward in the design work that you do, in the construction work. All of your majors lend itself directly or indirectly to doing more environmental and social justice. So that is my personal call to action. Again, I want to thank you all for being on this call, especially to Sharon Owens and Mary Margaret for being here. Again, this is recorded, so as soon as it is ready to go, I will send this out for folks. If there's any more information you all want, as well as contact info, we can definitely share that out.
Laura, could you send the link to me as well to the video?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes. All right, well, thank you all so much. Have a great Monday. I think that we just appreciate all of the work that you all are doing to help move this forward for us in our community.
Thank you. Enjoy your evening, everyone.